Live Life Being Adored, the art of celebrating everything there is in life, a podcast all about hosting, having, and attending amazing celebrations. Gathering matters, and you'll join me, award-winning event designer and publisher of Adore magazine, Kat Minks, as we delve into unique ways to have celebrations, why we have them, and the unique stories behind them, including places, people, themes, unique inspiration, meaningful events, and more. We touch on all kinds of celebrations and facets of them, from weddings, award shows, corporate gatherings, social events, kids' parties, birthdays, anniversaries, and the art of celebrating our gifts, purpose, and what we were created to do, which is gather. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Live Life Being Adored. I'm Kat Minks, your host, and the publisher of Adore magazine and owner of Adore Productions, an event, styling, and lifestyle consulting firm based in Minnesota, but we do all kinds of work with companies and people all over the U.S. So I am so excited to come to you today to talk a little bit about the new issue of Adore magazine. It's been a couple of years since we published an issue, and there are some really interesting reasons for that. The first we will go over in some of the articles that we're going to talk about that are in the new issue. It's fall, and I don't know about you, but I have little kiddos, and it's an exciting time of the season because for lots of reasons. Fall is a really busy season for those of us in events. I know that a lot of people are like, oh, but don't you mostly have events just in the summertime, especially being in Minnesota? But that's not the case anymore. Booking season is usually kicks off mid-fall, and so we're getting ready for that. There's a little bit of a lull that happens, at least for me, in the way that I schedule, but it's really an interesting time also because it's also a busy season for corporate events and a corporate event planning and a couple of other things. It's the kickoff to fall fashion, which is so fun and exciting. I have had a career in fashion and styling for many years. Now having the magazine, I have the opportunity to put together shoots along with other creatives and really showcase fashion and style as part of events and in everyday life. And just going through just different changes. It's a season of change, and fall is one of my favorite seasons for that reason, not just also because everything is so colorful and jewel tones. It's the prequel to the busy season of what the holidays bring too. And so we're going to talk and break down a little bit of everything in this episode of Adore, Live Life Being Adored. And I hope that you enjoy it. So let's get started. So as I mentioned before, we are going to break down a little bit of the new issue, or one of the articles at least, of the new issue of Adore magazine. Adore magazine was created by myself. I publish, produce, I write a lot of it. We have contributing writers and editors, but I pretty much am the chief and head of it all. And it's been a dream of mine to have this publication. I'm so excited to inspire people to celebrate as much as they can while we're all here. And that was one of my driving forces behind creating the publication. And a lot of people know me a lot from doing wedding and event work. And a lot of people thought that it was going to be wedding and event focused. But we also cover lots of topics. And one of the main things behind, creating and creating the publication and building the stories behind them and telling those stories behind them is really important, I think. And a lot of people don't think, that they'll open the magazine and they'll actually get a story that is an inside look at public events, social events of all types, along with private events, as well as being inspired. So we create inspiration behind celebration, or create inspiration for people to celebrate and tools to do that. But also we show people cool, amazing events to attend, but have real life stories behind them. There's a real lifestyle and spirituality piece behind some of the stories in the magazine. And we're going to break down one of the stories in the newest issue, which is the With Love issue of Adore magazine today. So actually you can download the issue of Adore magazine right on your phone or iPad or computer. If you are an Apple user, currently you can get that. And there are going to be other ways, or maybe by the time you're listening to this, there'll also be other ways. If you go to the Adore website, all of those downloadable options for digital version of the magazine will be available on the Adore website, which is, you can get there two ways. You can either go to adore-productions.com or just go to adoremagonline.com, and that will take you to the store and be able to download the issue or give you instructions on how to do that. Also, you can go to the Apple iBooks store currently. I'll show you the cover. And the cover is, I really fight really hard with covers, and I think you can see that when I do a cover, I have a really hard time choosing what the final product will be, and that's a really good problem to have in publishing. So for this issue, we actually did two covers, one of just a tabletop, because one of my most favorite covers that we ever did was my very first cover of Adore magazine, which was back in 2019, where we just showcased a really bright, beautiful table. And I think that was a great introduction to what we are. I want to encourage people to gather around a table and talk and share ideas and share your lives with each other. And so that was one of the things that I wanted to recreate for this issue as well. So we actually did do a tabletop picture, but then we also did a picture where I'm kind of inviting you into a room that is decorated with, fashion runway books on the table, and a unique way to really make a cool table with a fashion event theme, which is kind of like the undertone and fun part of what this issue of the magazine is, and inspire that. It's a really popular theme, of course, with Barbie and magenta being the color of the year right now. So we really wanted to showcase all of those trends and themes. So that's how we ended up with the newest cover of Adore magazine, which you'll see right now if you're watching. If you're not watching and you're listening to us, you can certainly go to the Adore website and you'll see the cover as well, or Apple Books, like I said. So, like I was saying before, Adore magazine has always been created to help people celebrate and inspire people to celebrate events of all different types in your life and anything that inspires you. And something that really inspires me and has throughout my career is, of course, fashion. And one of the things that I really wanted to cover for this issue of Adore magazine was a fashion week. And I wanted to highlight and showcase it. And in fact, one of the first things that I did when I moved back to Minnesota, even though it was a large part of my life when I was living in Los Angeles, is, and I did go to some fashion shows out there, of course, and I started my career in events actually before I even opened my event company, helping to produce fashion shows. And so I really have always wanted to create an article and really showcase what a local fashion event is. Some of, most fashionista dreams is to be able to sit front row at New York Fashion Week. And one of my all-time favorite people in the world is, of course, Anna Wintour, and she's an inspiring person. She's like my top 5. But I really wanted to cover Minnesota Fashion Week, and it was actually one of the first events that I attended when I moved back to Minnesota, and I thought, oh, this is so interesting. They really did a nice job of highlighting local designers. And it's how when I first moved back to Minnesota, it was how I first got introduced to what the local artist fashion scene was. And when we started looking at covering a fashion week, there were some different avenues and channels and things that we had to go through in order to set up what we would cover, and what types of things would be something that we would highlight. And so I'm going to go through with you in this article, or in this episode, about what we actually decided upon and why, and a few other things that will probably surprise you. So I think it goes without saying that I've always wanted the magazine to highlight some sort of style. And just like style is an art, celebrations are an art as well. And knowing how to produce them and be, of course, inclusive to people has become something that has been tricky. And just because times have changed, and you have to make changes and movements in the event world, just like you do in every other type of business. And I think that it's really important to note that many cities across the U.S. have fashion weeks. It's not just New York City, it's not just Minneapolis, and a lot of people wouldn't even think that Minneapolis has like a thriving art community that way. I think that's very new, probably, if you're listening and you're not in Minnesota. But also, Kansas City has one. There are fashion weeks all across the country. LA Fashion Week is, of course, a big one, too. But there are fashion weeks all across the country, and some of them are recognized by the CFDA, which is an organization that kind of, it's an accreditation if you are a part of this CFDA organization, or if you're an accredited event by the CFDA. And a lot of people don't even really know what a fashion week exactly is. And fashion weeks are typically a series of runway shows or gallery events that are a part of a single week of a series of events. And usually there's multiple per day within a week. And it highlights different artists in the community, whether they be, sometimes it's clothing designers only in each show, and sometimes there are other types of artists that are incorporated with the shows, which is really fun and unique if an event has like different types of artists that showcase their art during that show or event. And I do want to note that even if an event is not CFDA recognized, it doesn't make it a not good event. It still can be a great event, but I think it's important to realize how professional the event is organized. And we are going to talk more about that piece of events. So like I said, we're going to be covering some of what the fashion weeks are, and also in those types of social events, and why you should go, and if you're a business, why you should think about maybe your business being a part of it. When I sought out to cover Minnesota Fashion Week, I was really trying to bring to light the artistic community and what the local fashion community is, and what the experience of that would be. Adore has always tried to reach a wide array of audience groups. And because, people celebrate and have event and social experiences throughout their life, no matter what age you are, you'll attend an event or you'll have something to celebrate. So we really do appeal to a wide audience. And that was one of the things that when we first started figuring out how to write the Adore magazine article and that feature for the Fashion Week feature that we were going to have, that was one of the things that we thought would be a great draw to be a part of, maybe even helping produce an event in the Fashion Week. And I think people that generally put on celebrations, our publication appeals to people that are into hosting events and producing events. So I think that lends to a certain sophistication and a certain audience that would find this Fashion Week feature appealing. Also, people who generally love interior design and parties and celebrations have style or are interested in style, which was another key element in us deciding to feature a Fashion Week in Adore magazine. So moving forward, in deciding what we were going to feature as part of this particular feature and featuring a runway event was really showcasing and highlighting to people, look, there's a reason to leave your house for this type of event. I think in today's day and age, you really have to have a really good reason to want to leave your home. People are building homes where, they never have to leave because after the pandemic, we've found reasons to celebrate in our home or have people over and home entertain more. So you really have to have a draw, I think, to produce an event that people really want to come to. And we wanted to highlight that as a big, important piece, as a reason to go to a Fashion Week, because there are so many fun themes, and the art that you're going to see is unlike any other type of community or social community event that you might go to. So that was one big piece of us showcasing a runway fashion event in Adore magazine. My intention for this story was always to make it a really fun feature and draw. And when you go to read it, and I think you'll tell by the title, because the title is actually How to Overcome a Wolf in Sheep's Clothing, a story of the Minnesota Fashion Week. Always my intention was to showcase and spotlight local fashion and encourage people to get in touch with, local fashion in their own community, no matter where you live. And then as you read it, you will find out, and you can tell by the title, that what I experienced to be a part of this event and to put myself out there was actually something quite different. And it was completely unexpected, and I didn't even foresee that what occurred in the series of events that occurred while I was covering the event would happen, and brought upon a completely different story than I initially intended. It ended up being actually quite an emotional story, and something that I can only, put alongside what potentially you would find in an episode of like Sex and the City, and what Carrie Bradshaw would write about on the show about, her intention to get an idea in her head to cover something very innocently, and then all of these things happen. And that was very much what happened to me as I was covering Minnesota Fashion Week. So to kind of go through what some of the article is about, I'm going to treat you guys to a little bit of an audio version of this particular article, A Wolf in Sheep's Clothing, found in the Adore magazine with Love issue, volume 7. It's out now, and you can get it, and you can read the full article when you have a chance. But something else that I want to bring up on this episode of Live Life Being Adored is if you enjoy just listening to me reading a particular article from the magazine, let me know in the comments or send me an email and let me know if you enjoy just listening to me reading some of the content that's in Adore magazine. I think it's really important that we keep the magazine a digital version that you can actually go and download and read or order in print. But I know that people's lives are busy. And I also know that just like putting on your clothes to go to a wonderful event, no matter how wonderful it is, your life is busy and you only have a certain amount of time. So for those of you that are our listeners or readers that would much rather just hear the content and hear me describe it, I would love to hear that feedback because I am considering doing audio versions of Adore magazine on a regular basis. But for this episode of Live Life Being Adored, I'm going to share with you some excerpts from the How to Overcome a Wolf in Sheep's Clothing article found in Adore magazine, volume 7. So I'm going to start with page 28 of Adore magazine, and I'm going to read a little excerpt of 28 and then a piece of page 29. When it comes to fashion, my guiding principle has always been to present ideas, stories, and issues around fashion in a way that makes fashion accessible to anyone who wants to be a part of it. Like who, for example? The designer who wants to know when and how to approach a boutique to sell their line. The stay-at-home mom in a quandary about the amount of time away from a corporate environment and what's appropriate to wear now that she's returning. Someone that is celebrating a special occasion, perhaps a bride or groom, who want to bring their unique style to their event, but need affordable ideas because they're paying for their own wedding. Your style is an expression of where you've been, where you're going, and how you feel about yourself. And after being housebound in sweatpants for over a year because of the pandemic, expressing your style as you get out in the world once again has become top of mind for millions of Americans. Like most people, I have worked hard to get to where I am, and I have kept to my entrepreneurial and professional pursuits, event planning, magazine publishing, and consulting, even through periods of self-doubt, and sometimes being overwhelmed by deadlines and projects I committed to while responding as best I can to the needs of my husband and sons. I would have liked to get this Adore issue out a few weeks prior to now. I also would have liked to share this Fashion Week Minnesota story with Adore readers a year ago or more. But it took this amount of time for me to puzzle out my negative experience at the event itself with the organizers of Fashion Week Minnesota, and where I overlooked the red flags they were sending out as I moved forward in a misguided attempt to collaborate with them. That's why this article is titled A Wolf in Sheep's Clothing. I don't know if others have had a similar experience with the high-handed honchos of Fashion Week Minnesota, but from my point of view, the Bible passage that begins this piece could not be more fitting. The leadership at Fashion Week Minnesota and their minions backpedaled on potential collaborations with Adore, false prophets, and ultimately descended upon me like ravening wolves, as if I were some unwelcome interloper instead of the like-minded collaborator they claimed to have wanted. So as you may have guessed, the story does outline what happened next and when I innocently reached out to a group that I thought was somebody that I related with and that would be a great expansion to what my efforts in making Adore magazine was and is. I thought they would be great people to partner with and to lend some of my expertise in not just event planning, but also style and fashion. And the story goes on to talk about what happened when I put myself out there. And earlier I talked in this episode, I talked to you about how the story took a completely different turn than I had ever imagined. And it's pretty funny that that happened because so many people look at events and especially brides, and they think, if I just plan everything to a T, or if I do this or that everything's going to turn out perfectly in the way that I want it. And it doesn't always turn out the way that you think it will. And certainly for me in this event, it did not turn out the way that I thought it would. Going forward, I'm going to read some more excerpts of the actual article as well. But I do want to talk a little bit about what ended up happening, and then also about the underlying theme of what this article became. It still does showcase the idea of fashion weeks being a very interesting thing that people should look at attending. But the other interesting piece that ended up being the theme in this article was women supporting women, and also what's entailed with that, and when we don't do that, what happens. Also about how there's this really fantastic episode of Sex and the City that I remember, and there is something that happens that I describe in the article, and I can't wait for you to read it. But there's something that happens in the article that is it was just such a moment of, oh my God, this is such a fashion roadkill moment. And if you are a Sex and the City watcher, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But it's something that happened to me, and I thought, oh my gosh, you could not write this better than what the reality is, just almost always better, right, than what somebody could write. And it was one of those moments that happened to me as well. But in the story, you see that it happens over and over and over again. So yes, the article does talk about how I ended up, months before Fashion Week, in this particular Fashion Week that I cover, which was a couple of years ago. What actually happened was I was reaching out to them to say, hey, I have this great idea. Why don't we do some sort of, I'd love to try to do an event with Adore Magazine. And by the time they actually got to me, or got back to me, they had already settled on some people that they were going to have planned some events. And so I said, oh, that's great. I would actually love to collaborate with some of them. And so I was connected with a group of gals that were a designer and another artist that were producing an event. And I kind of touch on what happened with that. In essence, it fell apart, and it wasn't something that I ever expected to happen. And I was pretty frustrated by it, I guess you could say. But sometimes that just happens in events, and you have to, just like in events, there are good pieces of business and there are bad pieces of business, and you have to know how to distinguish the difference between the two, and deciding what's right for you and what's best for your brand and opportunities and things like that, and what isn't, and what is just not going, no matter what you do and what you say, it's just never going to be what you want it to be. And so it was kind of a blessing that me and having Adore Magazine a part of this particular event didn't work out. And while it was a frustrating collaboration, I do want to say that whenever you start to begin to plan an event, you immediately, any amount of time that you spend is valuable. And that's something that a lot of people don't think. Even if you're volunteering, your time is still valuable. And time is probably the most valuable commodity that any of us have anymore. I try to emphasize that with the magazine. Time is all we have, and so we need to celebrate and be joyful as much as we can and spread that joy and that love. And when you spend so much time and put heart into an event, you really want it you really want your time to be appreciated, and you want to be seen. So in the article, I break down some of the ways that we were collaborating and how it all kind of fell to pieces. And that was just one of the first pieces of what I felt like should have been red flags. And actually, when I look back, it wasn't the first piece. The first piece was that I had been reaching out and nobody was getting back to me. And then, things just kind of steamrolled from, okay, we want you. And then things, didn't turn out the way that I thought they would, or the way that I would have liked. So then moving forward, well, Adore had already committed to covering some of the shows. And so when we were no longer a part of producing one of the shows, we still had every intention to write an article about what Minnesota Fashion Week was, and as I explained, encouraging people to be involved in their local fashion and art community. And so that was always the intention of the article. And to maybe talk about some other fashion weeks potentially. And so in doing that, we still kept moving with the article, even though the partnership with the artists that we were going to work with fell apart. We still had every intention to keep our promise and to show what we thought would be still a good series of events. So I'm going to be reading another excerpt from the How to Overcome a Wolf in Sheep's Clothing article, and it goes like this. As they say, when one door closes, there's another door that locks you in a stairwell. Yep, that's what happened to my long-awaited solo evening out. When I went to the Sip and Bloom event, held on a rooftop of a renovated condo in Minneapolis in the Warehouse District, I arrived 30 minutes late and to a locked door. Fashion shows and other professional events usually have staff manning the entrance, not only for registration, but for latecomers too. It would seem that Fashion Week Minnesota staff prioritized their own entertainment over event management. I grabbed the handle and darted up the stairs to the roof, not knowing I had entered into a humid chamber of stairs. Talk about being outside looking in. I was able to see the show through a small window that I wiped the humidity from. I pounded on the soundproof door and yelled as I watched oblivious Fashion Week Minnesota volunteers saunter by me. No one diverted their eyes from the show to see what I was trying to gain entrance. I was able to take photographs, but just a few you see within the stairwell from my vantage point. From what I did see, the show was beautiful. So there you have it. That was my entrance into the Fashion Week Minnesota kickoff event. And there's some other things that are detailed in the article that talk about what happened in the days leading up to that. Some people might say, why did you keep going? Why did you have every intention to keep trying to cover this event? I'm trying to tell a very real experience and to also explain to people that you obviously can't always take things at face value. Just like you can't always believe that what you see on social media is actually what somebody's life is. We have this thing in our society called comparisonitis. It's a terrible disease, and we love to compare ourselves to everybody and say, well, if I only had this, or look at them, they have this, and I need to be keeping up to that. And because of that, and because it's such a painful thing in society that we all experience, I think, from one time or another, I really wanted to show you in the article that you can't always assume that what you see, whether it be a person or a business or an organization, is actually reality. So one of the things about the process of Fashion Week that is has been around for as long as it has, or as long as Minnesota Fashion Week has, is, the ultimate goal is to be recognized by the CFDA. And that's the Council of Fashion Designers of America. And there's a whole board of people that, determine different things and different events and awards surrounding it and a whole bunch of things. So one of the things that I felt was really important is to highlight some great pieces about what Minnesota Fashion Week was, which was always my initial intent, but to also check with the CFDA as to what the process was in someone becoming official, deemed by them. And so I began to reach out to CFDA prior to the final event, because I noticed that Minnesota Fashion Week was not on their website as an official event of theirs, or that they are sending people to, or that they promote. And so I did go to the final event, the closing show of Minnesota Fashion Week that year, and still with the intent to cover the event as it was, and encourage and bring light to local fashion weeks around the country. Well, in doing so, I actually struck up a conversation with one of the people on the board of Minnesota Fashion Week, and her name is Susan Lepke, and we had a very wonderful, warm conversation at that point. As a journalist, I feel it's my duty to make sure that I check facts before I publicize any kind of element like a national organization or worldwide organization like the CFDA, or talk about them. So after my conversation with her, in which she said that, there were talks about certain events and CFDA being a part of that, in collaboration with Minnesota Fashion Week and different types of things. And I talk about it in the article more, and you can read more about it in there. But I, of course, went to go fact check, because that's what journalists do. They check facts. Once you get an account from somebody, you do a little bit of fact checking, not to say that somebody is not telling the truth, but you want to know why. You want to know what the process was. And that was pretty much my intent by contacting the CFDA, is say, okay, you don't have Minnesota Fashion Week on your roster. What is the process that they have to go through to become that? Because I was planning to incorporate that into the story. Naturally, my inquiry to the CFDA about Minnesota Fashion Week at that point was merely to say, okay, so they're not one of your accredited events. So what is the process that somebody has to go through to become that? Just being curious, because it's not outlined on the website. It's a contact page of somebody you contact if you're interested, or they might review you. So that was my complete intention by contacting the CFDA and saying, well, okay, so you don't have this list on your list of events on your website. And to my knowledge, at that point, even though I had still gone through what I had gone through, I was still planning on doing like a joyful, lighthearted highlight of this. What the article became, like I said, and what the feature became was much different than I had ever intended. If you've read some of our other issues, you will know that we showcase local artists from all over the country, small businesses, small fashion designers, up-and-coming fashion designers. We take our own time to highlight and showcase them. Even though they're not advertisers in the magazine, we still put their work in the magazine. And I think it should be noted that just like what I thought Minnesota Fashion Week did, or what I thought a lot of fashion weeks were doing as in terms of highlighting fashion fashion designers and local artists, we take our own time, our own money to try to do that with Adore magazine. I think there's an aha moment too in the article, Wolf in Sheep's Clothing, because there's a part of me through the whole process that was feeling like, how could I be so stupid and naive? After how many times have I consulted with other businesses on, this would be a good avenue for you, or, these are people that you should link yourself with. And I felt like, oh my gosh, how could I have been so naive to have continually tried to link myself with these particular groups of people, to thinking that it would be good for my own business and my own publication. And I think in that, it took me a very long time to accept for myself what had happened, because I felt so emotional about it. I was like, I did everything I could. I tried as hard as I could to make this partnership move forward, a partnership that in anybody's mind would have been, you would be crazy not to do this. Your life has been about fashion. You've been a wardrobe stylist. You've styled for TV, styled for runway, put on runway shows. You produce events of all different types for 16 years at that point. Now it's been 18. You would be crazy not to do something that would be so outwardly, to me, it seemed like, a huge event. And so we should, definitely align ourselves with that event. And I felt so emotional and naive about the fact of how things turned out. So as you're reading this, you're going to also notice how long it's been since this event actually took place. This Fashion Week event that I tried to be a part of and attend actually happened a couple of years ago. And some of the reasons why I was so emotional and stunned, and why it took me so long to get this story right, in terms of making it a readable story for Adore magazine, because obviously the right version to me was the emotional version that I put down to pen and paper as it was happening. And over time, I realized that I couldn't put so much of my own emotion into the article, because the whole idea of the magazine is to be lighthearted and joyful and talk about events. So I think we found a really good happy medium in doing that with this article. But I do have to say that it took me a while to piece it all together, and not make it a mean girl attack like what I experienced during that process. I think there was a certain amount of grief that I experienced from being a part of this. I think I put my whole heart into my work, whether it be an event or this publication especially. And when things didn't go how I thought they would, it took me a long time to really make it in a digestible version for an Adore reader, and still focus on the event aspect of it, but also to tell this story of, not comparing yourself to other people, being true to who you are, and also to really make some sort of positivity and show that women should support women and uplift, and show this how that affects people when you don't do that. In essence, I hope that nobody goes through ever again what I went through. Like I said before, Adore tries to cover and incorporate local artists, designers, showcase small businesses, and really try to be as uplifting as we can and as inspiring as we can. And so I hope that when you read this article, and even if there are people that are part of the Fashion Week organization that read this article, they see this series of events as a misstep to make it better and to not ever have that be again for anyone else. And to also, I was very stunned of what happened because we had done an article of the CEO before. We did a feature article of her. And so, and I got to think that she had that she knew that some of these things were transpiring as they were happening, just given some of the responses at the events that I was at and different situations. So and when you are putting on a big event like that, there's lots of moving pieces and people, but there also is communication that happens to any degree, and I'm sure to a lot of degrees. When somebody says that they're going to be a producer of something and all of a sudden they're not, obviously there was probably conversations about that. So there's an instance outlined in the article where I talk about how in being generous and acting as what they wanted to call a partner, I saw much more as time went on as being a sponsor. And typically when you are a sponsor, there is a certain type of recognition that aligns with the amount of what you're providing, whether that be goods or time or labor or whatever. So there was a point in this partnership that Adore was to have with helping to produce one of the events, where I had said, hey, look, this has grown into something much larger than what you said. It was, initially just we need a little bit of help, and then it was, days upon days and hours and many goods and the loading in of trees and other things that were going to be utilized of my time, Adore's time, and goods. And so I had said, hey, would it be possible to have, a logo or more than something that was a thanks? And so I think it's really important whenever you are planning an event, if you're planning a corporate event and you're a business and you're supplying anything for any type of event, I think it's really important to detail and outline exactly what that is going to be before the event or before printed materials will be put out. And if you're working with people that aren't accustomed to planning big events, and I think you should stand up for yourself and say, hey, I am doing this amount of work. I think it equates to this amount for signage or sponsorship or whatever. And I think people should never be afraid to say that or do that. Unfortunately, in the instance of this particular event that I was starting to plan or had a hand in planning with these people, it backfired on me because I didn't outline right away. But also it was, things were coming together very last minute too. And so I don't think that they had sponsorship packages outlined by any means. And so it ended up being a very negative experience because of the fact that I stood up for myself and I said, hey, I am doing a lot here. I deserve something a little bit more, I feel. And the language and verbiage that they came back at me with was surprising. I was actually called entitled, and I don't agree with that at all. I think that if you're a woman business owner, and you're giving a lot of your time to something at any point, and you ask for recognition for it, I don't think that you should have to apologize for that. So that sums up my experience with Minnesota Fashion Week. And I hope that you enjoyed hearing about this article. I hope that it intrigues you to pick up an issue of Adore magazine. This With Love issue is a really meaningful issue to me. Like I said, it's our kind of comeback issue after not publishing an issue for 2 years and kind of taking a break. But I think it was good. It helped us to re-evaluate the publication and all the different types of events that really should be spotlighted in the magazine. We have different areas and arenas that we cover, whether it be an engagement story or a birthday, or in one of our previous issues, we highlighted a girlfriend's trip to Charleston. And so I think we're going to continue moving forward with those themes and the different ways that people celebrate, whether it be an event in, something that you travel to, or whether it's an event in your home, or if it's a wedding. And we will feature all of those types of joyful life events. I think it's really important, and important to be inspired too, to celebrate more. So I hope that you pick up an issue of Adore magazine. You listen to the podcast Live Life Being Adored. We will have more stories coming up in the Live Life Being Adored show and podcast. And I just am excited to hear your feedback and about the issue and about the podcast. And I can't wait to hear from all of you. So with that said, live life being adored, and pick up your issue, the With Love issue of Adore magazine. Till next time.